she thought the little elephant she raised would never remember her. But years later, when she spoke just one word, the entire wildlife reserve froze. Because the giant bull elephant turned, trumpeted, and came running straight toward her voice. The sound of rain against the tin roof was the first thing she remembered about that night, the night that changed everything. Claire Bennett, a 27-year-old wildlife volunteer from Oregon, stood on the wooden veranda of Kenya's Tsavo Orphaned Sanctuary with a notebook in one hand and a flashlight in the other. She had come to Africa 5 months earlier, chasing purpose, chasing something she could not name. Before this place, she had been a social worker in Portland, worn down by paperwork and tragedy until she began to fade inside her own life. But here, thousands of miles from the world she knew, she felt awake again. She did not know that within minutes, she would meet the elephant who would rewrite every future she had ever imagined. The radio crackled. 2 rangers were returning from night patrol. Their voices carried urgency, winded breath, something uneasy. Claire walked down the steps, rain glittering across the beam of her flashlight. A jeep approached the gate at high speed, muddy tires throwing red earth behind them. She saw helmets, rifles, and between them, she saw movement. Something alive. Something crying. The rangers jumped out before the engine even stopped. "Calf," one called. "Mother's gone." Claire froze. She had assisted elephant intakes before, but nothing prepared her for the sight of this calf. Barely 3 months old, tiny for its species, soaked to the bone, trembling, wide-eyed. The rain made its ears glisten like black silk. And when its small brown eyes lifted, they didn't look at the rain, or at the jeep, or even the rangers. They looked at Claire. She stepped forward slowly, heartbeat roaring in her ears. Her flashlight trembled. The calf moved toward her, weak, dragging its feet, trunk reaching, searching. And then she saw it, small, deep rope wounds around its ankle. Poachers had snared the mother, killed her, and the calf had refused to leave the body. Rangers found it standing over the carcass, calling out hour after hour in the storm. Claire sank to her knees, one careful inch at a time. The calf lowered its head and pressed its wet forehead against her chest. She didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Didn't speak. She could only feel the tiny shudders running through its skin. Its heartbeat was frantic and terrified, thudding through her shirt, through her ribs, into her soul. She whispered the first word that came to her mind, Kali. It meant fierce in Swahili, even though the calf looked anything but fierce. But the name stuck, as if the universe had been waiting for this exact moment. 2 hours later, Kali lay in the nursery wrapped in blankets, for fluids running. Claire sat beside him, her hand resting lightly against his small trunk. He barely slept. Every few minutes he made a low, heart-breaking rumble, the sound of an infant calling its mother into the darkness. Claire spoke softly, told him stories about Oregon rain and pine trees and ocean wind, until finally, near dawn, he fell asleep for the first time since his mother died. From that moment on, Claire's life belonged to him. She fed him bottles every 3 hours, waking before the alarms. She walked him through morning grass so his muscles strengthened. She sang to him when storms came and thunder made him tremble. The other handlers warned her not to imprint too deeply, not to forge a connection too strong, because once elephants grew old enough for re-wilding, they had to return to protected savanna zones. Claire heard their words, understood their warnings, and broke every rule anyway. Because Kali chose her. When he learned to trumpet, he did it first for Claire. When he learned to bathe, he splashed water at her feet until they both dripped and laughed like children. Every night, before he slept, he would wrap his trunk around her arm, not pulling, just holding, like a child refusing to let go. 6 months passed. Then 12. Claire stopped being a volunteer and became a full-time sanctuary guardian. She no longer daydreamed of Oregon. She no longer planned for anything beyond Kali's tomorrow. They talked without words, her voice, his rumble, silent understanding in touch and breath and presence. Then the day came. The relocation board arrived with trucks, paperwork, government permits, and hardened expressions. Callie was ready to join other young males in a protected, monitored wild zone nearly 400 kilometers away. It had to happen. If he stayed, he would never learn to be wild. He would never join a herd. He would never learn migration paths. He would die carrying the ways of humans rather than elephants. Claire signed the release papers. Her signature shook so violently that one ranger held the clipboard for her. Callie sensed something wrong. He circled her 3 times, trunk searching, rumble rising in distress. She placed her forehead against his, their final habit. "You have to go," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheek. "You belong to the wild, not to me." He answered with a low, broken cry she would hear in her nightmares for years. The truck door closed. His trunk reached desperately through the bars. Claire could not move. Could not speak. The diesel engine roared. The truck rolled away. Callie screamed. Every elephant in the sanctuary answered. Claire collapsed to the dirt. He was gone. 5 years passed. Claire returned to Oregon, worked at a wildlife preserve, spoke at conferences, wrote conservation papers, smiled politely when interviews said elephants remember voices but forget faces. But she never forgot the feeling of that trunk around her arm. She never forgot the sound he made the night they took him. She never forgot the name Callie. Then everything changed again. A producer from a European wildlife network called offering her a guest expert position on a live broadcast featuring animals from African sanctuaries, a celebration of successful rewilding programs. One segment would include a young adult bull elephant named Callie, now thriving in a special reintegration reserve. Claire felt the world tilt under her feet. They didn't know her connection to him. She didn't tell them. 2 weeks later, Claire boarded a plane to London. She convinced herself he would never remember. Elephants didn't remember early keepers, people said. 5 years was too long, they said. She believed them. But she went anyway. Because some part of her heart was still standing on a red earth road under stormlit skies, whispering a name to a trembling calf that had lost everything. And she needed to know if love like that truly vanished. The elephants moved like ghosts through the dawn mist, their silhouettes enormous against the pale Kenyan sunrise. Anna walked beside the keepers, her notebook tucked under her arm, pretending to be calm, pretending that the sight of the orphan enclosure didn't make her chest burn. She had come here to report a story about elephant conservation, to observe, to write, to document. She had not come here to feel. But the sanctuary had other plans for her. Inside the chain-link fence lay 19 rescued baby elephants, ranging from 2 months to 3 years old. They moved together as if they were pieces of a single soul, trunks touching, ears brushing, bodies pressed side by side. The keepers opened the gate, and the herd ambled toward the morning feeding area, their big brown eyes blinking sleep from their long lashes. Anna froze as one particular calf lagged behind the rest. He was impossibly small. Barely hip height. Weak. Tilting a little to the left, as if unsure his legs could carry him. His ribs were visible beneath his dusty grey skin. And his ears drooped like wilted leaves. That one, the head keeper Samuel murmured at her side, arrived last night. We almost lost him twice during the night. Without milk, he wouldn't have made it another few hours. Anna swallowed hard. What happened to his mother? Samuel hesitated. Poachers. Ivory. The word felt like a physical blow. Anna closed her eyes to steady herself. She had covered tragedy before, wars, fires, human loss, but this was different. Something about animals made grief sharper. They did nothing to deserve the cruelty they received. The calf stumbled again and collapsed onto his knees. Anna's body moved before she thought. She dropped her notebook, hurried across the enclosure, and knelt before him. Hey, it's okay, she whispered. She had no idea why she said it. Maybe because the calf looked like he needed a mother, not a journalist. The baby elephant looked up. Right at her. And she felt something inside her ribs shift, something ancient, something instinctive, something wordless. His trunk lifted, trembling, and brushed her arm. Samuel watched silently. The other keepers stopped walking. Even the older calves turned, as if recognizing something profound forming between human and orphan. "He likes you," Samuel said quietly. Anna didn't breathe. "He doesn't know me," she whispered. "He knows kindness," Samuel replied. The calf tried to stand again, legs shaking under his tiny weight. Anna slid her hands under his shoulder and helped brace him. He managed it, but as soon as she let go, he pressed himself against her hip for balance. Samuel exhaled softly. "We were going to name him today. Sanctuary tradition says the first person he bonds with should choose." Anna blinked at him. "Me? He chose you." She stared into the calf's enormous amber eyes. They were ancient, knowing, full of pain and hope. "Eli," she whispered. Samuel smiled. "Eli," he repeated, nodding. "It fits." Anna spent the rest of the morning walking beside the little elephant. Feeding him. Touching him. Talking to him softly because her voice seemed to calm him. By midday, Eli was following her everywhere. Through the mud. Around the feeding stalls. Even to the fence when she left to write notes. He would press his trunk through the gaps to touch her wrist, refusing to let go. That night at the sanctuary lodge, Anna stared at the ceiling of her small wooden cabin. Wind rattled the tin roof. Hyenas laughed far in the dark distance. She tried to write her script, but her fingers froze. Her story wasn't journalism anymore. It was a confession. Eli had already found the part of her she'd spent 3 years burying. The 13-year-old girl she once had been, who used to sit outside every night listening to elephants call from her grandparents' farm miles away. The girl whose mother used to tell stories of elephants mourning their dead with tears. The girl who had dreamed of growing up to save animals until tragedy stole her voice. Her mother's death 2 years ago had broken her. She had buried herself in work because anything else hurt too much. Love required risk, and risk meant losing. But now Eli was inside her chest, refusing to be ignored. The following morning, Samuel met her at the nursery with milk bottles ready for feeding. "You didn't sleep," he said gently. Anna lifted a shoulder. Neither did Eli. The baby elephant chirped at the sound of her voice. Anna laughed, really laughed, for the first time since her mother died. Samuel watched Eli drink from the bottle Anna held. "He won't survive unless someone commits to him." She paused. "What do you mean?" "Elephants don't eat properly unless they bond. Without attachment, they give up." She looked at Eli. The tiny creature leaning against her leg. The calf with a future tied to her heartbeat. Samuel lowered his voice. "If you walk away now, he might die." The words hit her like lightning. Eli wrapped his trunk around her wrist again. Anna whispered, "Then I'm not leaving." And she meant it. Days turned into routines. Bottle feedings. Dust baths. Night walks around the sanctuary under giant moonlight. Eli followed Anna everywhere. When she sat to record narration, Eli lay across her feet. When she edited footage outside, he wrapped his trunk around her shoulder like a hug. When she cried quietly at night remembering her mother, Eli pressed his forehead against her chest like he understood grief. Samuel noticed the change. "Eli chose you," he said. "Elephants never forget the ones who save them." Anna had no idea how literal those words would become. She stayed at the sanctuary for 6 months. Her job became bottle feeding, mud bathing, and teaching Eli how to trust humans again. He learned to run without collapsing. He learned to trumpet with joy. He learned to sleep peacefully beside the other calves. But every sunrise, he returned to Anna first. Even when keepers opened the pasture gates, he ran straight to her, ears flapping, trunk waving, trumpeting her name. Anna loved him more than she had ever loved anything. And that terrified her. Because 6 months later, her contract ended. Her network called her home. Leaving Eli felt like ripping bone from flesh. He followed her to the sanctuary gate crying, trumpeting, slamming his tiny forehead into the fence. His trunk reached desperately toward her face, trembling with confusion and fear. Anna had to pry his trunk away. She kissed his forehead, whispered that she would come back, and walked away shaking. Eli screamed behind her. The sound chased her across oceans. And the moment she stepped onto that plane, Anna believed he would forget her. Everyone told her elephants remembered, but Anna didn't believe them. Not then. Not until 5 years later. When the world watched a miracle unfold on live television. The forest around them seemed to breathe with life as Maya followed the scent markers and subtle footprints of the elephant herd. Her boots sank slightly into the damp soil, crushed leaves releasing earthy fragrance beneath each step. Late afternoon sun painted warm orange streaks through the dense canopy overhead, turning floating dust particles into glittering gold. She had walked these paths 1,000 times during her 2-year stay in India, paths that once echoed with the rumbling calls of elephants she knew by heart. But today, there was no call. Rishi walked beside her, holding a tracking tablet, eyes shifting between the map and Maya's movements. "They should be close," he whispered, slowing his voice as if the trees themselves were listening. Maya nodded, breath shaky. Everything about standing in this forest again felt unreal, the humid air on her neck, the distant calls of birds she had forgotten she remembered, the hush of life moving in shadows. But most unreal of all was the thought burning inside her. If Mira truly recognized American voices, then Maya wasn't just walking into a forest. She was walking into fate. She wiped sweat from her forehead and tasted salt. She remembered sweating just like this 5 years ago, except she had been kneeling in mud, hands trembling around the tiny infant elephant who had collapsed during her first night at the rescue center. She could still hear the rain that had slammed against the tin roof of her enclosure back then, thunder rattling the earth beneath her. She could still see the drenched, trembling calf lying motionless before her. And she could still hear its first sound. That faint, shaking rumble, the sound a baby makes when begging the world not to leave. That was the night Mira entered her life. The memory hit her so vividly she stumbled. Rishi grabbed her elbow. "You okay?" "Yes," she whispered, though her heart felt like glass. The forest thinned slightly and they stepped into a riverbed, its stone smoothed by decades of monsoon water. Only a trickle of water shimmered now, reflecting sky like a broken mirror. Animal prints dotted the mud, hoof prints, paw prints, and Rishi knelt. Elephant tracks. Fresh. Maya's pulse hammered. A storm of memories erupted. When Mira was only 9 months old, she used to stand on Maya's boots, swinging her trunk like a child trying to imitate dancing. She used to wrap that tiny trunk around Maya's wrist whenever thunder frightened her. Every wind gust against Maya now felt like that same trunk, ghost-like, gripping her past. They pressed forward. The air changed. Thickened. Became heavy with silence. And then a deep rumbling sound vibrated through the ground. Maya stopped breathing. That sound had once woken her from sleep every night, soft, rhythmic, comforting rumble. Now it struck her bones like lightning. "Rishi," she whispered. "That's a contact rumble." He nodded. "Yes. They're close, very close." A second rumble followed. This one lower, sharper, warning. Then trees shifted ahead. Leaves trembled. Branches snapped. The herd was moving. Maya swallowed the urge to break into a run. Rishi put a hand out to stop her, to protect her, to hold her back from the weight of a reunion she wasn't ready to face. "Remember, these elephants don't know you're here yet," he said quietly. "Approach slowly. Speak only when the matriarch permits. And if she turns away." Maya closed her eyes. "I know. We leave." They stepped forward. The first elephant appeared through the brush. A massive female, skin thick and wrinkled as old tree bark, ears wide as sails. She towered nearly 9 feet high, dust clinging to her body, sunlight striking her tusks. She stared at Maya. Still. Silent. unmoving. Every instinct in Maya screamed to kneel. She didn't. She remained steady, gaze calm, body relaxed. She remembered every rule Amira had taught her. Show respect. Show humility. Show you are no threat. The female shifted, lifted her trunk, sniffed the air. Maya whispered, voice shaking, name asked. The elephant huffed softly. And then another shape emerged behind her, smaller, leaner, younger. Maya's lungs failed. This elephant was the one from the photo. The one with the uneven ear tear. The one with the faded scar beside her right eye. The one who had once slept with her trunk wrapped around Maya's leg like a terrified child clinging to safety. Mira. But older. Stronger. So much bigger than Maya remembered. No longer the 10-month-old calf Maya had fed bottles to through sleepless nights. This was a full-grown adolescent elephant, towering above her, nearly 6 feet tall at the shoulder. But the eyes. Those eyes were the same. Amber brown. Wide. Curious. Mira stared at her, body rigid, trunk slightly lifted, frozen between instinct and recognition. Rishi whispered behind Maya, speak. Maya opened her mouth. But no sound came. Her throat tightened painfully. Tears blurred her vision. She forced herself to breathe. Then, voice trembling, she whispered. Mira? The elephant froze completely. As if struck by lightning. She blinked. Her trunk lowered. Her ears twitched. Something ancient flared in her gaze, something wild and familiar. Recognition. Slowly, Mira stepped forward. One careful foot. Then another. Maya stood still, tears spilling unchecked. Rishi whispered urgently, Maya, do not move. She didn't. She couldn't. Mira stretched her trunk toward Maya's face. Closer. Closer. Until the very tip touched Maya's cheek, gentle, trembling. 5 years collapsed in a single breath. The world vanished. Forest, cameras, fear, distance, everything gone. There was only a woman. And the elephant she had once raised. Finding each other again. In a place where science said memories could not survive. Mira released the smallest, softest rumble. The infant sound Maya had once fallen asleep to. Maya sobbed. It was her. It was truly her. She whispered one word. The same word she had whispered the night she left 5 years earlier. I'm here. The herd shifted behind Mira. Trunks lifted. Footsteps stilled. The forest seemed to kneel. Mira wrapped her trunk around Maya's wrist. Exactly like she used to do as a baby. And Maya whispered through shaking breath. You remembered. The next morning began with the type of African sunrise Maya had only ever dreamed of, molten gold spilling over mist-covered grasslands, shapes moving across the horizon like ghosts. But she didn't see any of it. She sat on the veranda of the camp house, elbows pressed against the wooden table, staring at a single sheet of paper that Elena, her mentor, had slid across the surface just before breakfast. It was a behavioral assessment report. For Asha. Every line felt like a knife, agitation increasing, vocal distress, disoriented, calling out at night, rejection by herd continuing. Maya read the report twice, then folded it carefully and placed it back on the table, hands trembling. Samuel poured tea silently beside her, the steam drifted upward like smoke from burning history. She needs you, the old ranger said softly. Maya shook her head. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a vet. Samuel smiled in that irritatingly calm way. You are the one she imprinted on. That matters more than degrees on paper. Go. Maya stood up slowly. Her legs were heavy, her heart felt bruised. As she walked past the staff quarters, a pair of young rangers whispered to each other. That's the girl, one said. She's the reason the elephant won't join the herd. Guilt hit harder than the sunlight. Maya kept walking until she reached the enclosure. Asher was there, standing motionless against the far corner, forehead pressed against the fence post, ears drooped, trunk limp across the dirt. The elephant looked nothing like the playful calf Maya remembered. She looked broken. A memory flashed across Maya's mind, the day they separated them. The screaming. The thundering hooves on concrete. The stain of blood on the metal gate where Asher had slammed her head during panic. Maya blinked hard. She stepped toward the fence slowly. Asher? Nothing. Asher. The calf didn't move. Dr. Kaib appeared beside Maya, clipboard tucked under her arm, sweat on her brow. She isn't responding to anyone, the vet said quietly. Her appetite is dropping. She has refused training. She barely sleeps. And we cannot release her like this. Maya swallowed. Do you want me to leave? Will she get better if I go? Kaib hesitated. I wanted that answer for years, she finally said. But science doesn't explain everything. She remembers your voice. We confirmed it yesterday. Maya turned sharply. How? Playback recordings. Elephant vocal memory is powerful. When we used your voice, her cortisol levels dropped instantly. Maya stared at the vet. You recorded me. Kaib exhaled. I recorded her reaction. And? She tried to break through the enclosure. Maya felt her skin run cold. That wasn't just memory. That was yearning. Come, Kaib said gently. I need to show you something. They entered the observation block, a narrow structure overlooking the enclosure. Inside, there were old computers, binders stacked to the ceiling, faded charts, and a large projector screen. Kaib dimmed the lights. The screen illuminated with the shaky footage taken the night Asher arrived at the sanctuary 5 years earlier. There was Maya, 20 years old, mud smeared across her cheeks, cradling a baby elephant whose chest rose in rapid, terrified breaths. There was Samuel, trying to insert and foredrip while Maya whispered to the calf in broken Swahili. There was Asher, small and shaking, pushing her head into Maya's stomach and sobbing through trumpeted gasps. Maya covered her mouth. I didn't realize you recorded this, she whispered. We didn't, Kaib said softly. That footage came from your phone. You sent it to us the day you left. You said, use this to help her bond with other humans. Maya's knees shook. She had forgotten she'd ever said that. Kaib clicked to the next video. Asher, 6 months old, running clumsily, trunk swinging like a rope, squealing with exaggerated joy. Maya laughing behind the camera. You trained her, Kaib murmured. You taught her bottle scheduling. You learned her language. Maya whispered, I thought that's what anyone would do. No, Kaib said. Most people break. You didn't. The next video loaded. It was the last recording from before Maya left Kenya. The sanctuary night sky. The sound of insects humming. A trembling whisper? I promise I'll come back, baby. I promise. Maya shut her eyes. She had forgotten that too. When the lights came back on, Kaib turned to her. You remember what she sounded like when she first arrived? Maya nodded. She called for her mother for days. And what does she sound like now? Kaib asked. Maya hesitated. Then answered. She calls for me. Kaib nodded. That is not a problem. That is a responsibility. Maya's breath hitched. But filming. Kaib held up a hand. The documentary does not have to be a performance. It can be truth. Maya looked back out onto the enclosure. Asher was staring now, ears lifted, eyes wide. She must have heard Maya's voice through the wall. The elephant took a step toward the fence. Then another. Her trunk lifted. Her mouth opened in a ghost soft rumble that shook Maya's ribs. She recognizes you, Kaib whispered. Through concrete, Maya whispered back. Asha walked until she was pressed against the metal bars, breathing rapidly. Maya placed her forehead against the fence. Something ancient passed between them, older than language. Behind them, Samuel spoke from the doorway. "She is ready." Maya turned, confused. "Ready for what?" "The herd trial," he said. A nerve sparked in Maya's chest. "Already?" Samuel nodded. "Tomorrow morning, she will be released into the main plains enclosure. 30 acres. Full herd access. It's time." Maya shook her head. "She isn't ready." "She must be." Her pulse hammered. What if she panics? What if she runs? What if she gets hurt? Samuel shrugged. What if she flies? Maya stared at him. This isn't a fairy tale. Samuel shrugged again. Everything alive wants something. Asha wants a herd. And me. Maya whispered. Samuel smiled sadly. She wants you, too. That night, rain poured like shattered glass against the rooftops. Thunder shook the metal frames. Floodlights flickered over the sanctuary as rangers patrolled the walkways, boots splashing through rising puddles. Maya stood alone at the edge of the enclosure, soaked clothes sticking to her skin, hair dripping down her back, eyes fixed on Asha. The elephant wouldn't sleep. She paced in slow circles. Her trunk occasionally reached for the fence, searching. Maya whispered, voice breaking. "I'm here." Asha stopped. Rain slid off her ears. Lightning flashed. The elephant stepped closer to the fence. So close Maya could have reached out and touched her. Maya whispered, "Tomorrow, everything changes." Asha blinked. And the elephant answered with a single low rumble. A sound full of faith. Full of fear. Full of love. The storm rolled on through the night, but neither girl, neither woman nor elephant, moved away from that fence. They stood together in the rain, waiting for dawn, waiting for destiny, waiting for the moment the world would watch them break apart, or reunite forever. Tomorrow, the herd would decide everything. The rain had stopped by the time Maya reached the sanctuary gates. The world outside felt washed clean, but inside her chest a storm still raged. She stood beside the jeep that had brought her from the hotel, clutching her satchel as if it were armor. She could hear elephants somewhere beyond the fence, deep rumbling breaths, the shifting of bodies against wet soil, tusks scraping bark. Every sound pressed against her heart like memory turned physical. Grace walked ahead, her boots soft in the damp red dirt. "They're at the river enclosure," she said quietly. "We keep the family group closest to the water this time of year. They like the mud cooling their skin." Maya nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. Her voice still trembled with shock from the unexpected reunion the day before, the trumpet that had broken the silence, the trembling earth beneath her feet, that impossible moment when Kibbo had charged the fence because he had known her. 5 years had passed, but in seconds it had collapsed into nothing. But last night, lying awake beneath a mosquito net that swayed like memory-made fabric, doubt had crept in. What if she had imagined it? What if she had projected feelings onto a wild animal out of loneliness and longing? Maybe elephants were simply curious. Maybe Kibbo had reacted to excitement, not love. A younger version of her would have accepted the miracle without hesitation. But 5 years of grief, guilt, and rationality had made her cautious. She needed proof, not for the world, not even for the sanctuary, but for herself. They reached a smaller structure built at the center of the grounds, wooden beams, tin roof, mud walls painted in patterns inspired by Kikuyu tradition. Inside were documents, photos, maps. Grace pushed open the door. The hinges groaned. "This is the record room," she said. "Every rescued elephant has a folder, health, behavior, milestones. We want you to see Kibbo's." Maya stepped inside. The room smelled like old paper and dust, sunlight filtering through small square windows, laying gold squares across the tables. Grace handed her a thick folder, overstuffed, edges soft from handling. Maya opened to the first image. Kibbo at 8 months, frail, underweight, ribs like lines drawn beneath grey skin. The caption read, "Found beside mother's carcass. Female confirmed poached. Infant would have died within hours." Maya's chest constricted. She remembered that night, his trembling legs, how he pressed his forehead to her chest, taking comfort from the first human touch that wasn't violent. She turned the page. Another photograph, Kibbo at 2 years, rolling in a pool of mud, larger, stronger. Another, 3 years, learning to strip bark with his tusks. For years, walking with the herd, trunk curled playfully around another elephant's tail. Every year was accounted for. But it wasn't the photos that stopped her breath. It was the notes. Subject becomes distressed when hearing female voices with American accent. Vocalizes, low-frequency rumble, searching behavior. Sanctuary staff uncertain why. Maya stared at the words as if they were fire. There, on the page, was proof she had not imagined anything. Grace watched her expression closely. "You see," she murmured. "He didn't forget you." Maya swallowed. "But why tell me now? Why bring me here today?" Grace hesitated. "Because Dr. Amina has a question for you. It might be difficult." Before Maya could respond, the door creaked again. Dr. Amina entered, crisp khaki uniform, hair wrapped in deep maroon cloth, eyes sharp with intelligence and something gentler underneath. "Maya," she said with warmth, "thank you for coming." Maya nodded. Amina sat opposite her. "You have seen the notes. You have witnessed his behavior. But what I need to ask you now is this: are you truly ready to see him up close? Without offense." The word seemed to echo through the room. "Up close." Maya repeated. "Yes," Amina said softly. "He has not responded to handlers this morning. He woke restless. He searched every enclosure. He vocalized for hours. We believe he is waiting for you." Maya looked down at her trembling hands. "I don't know if I'm ready." Amina leaned forward. "Then listen to me carefully. Most elephants adapt to new social structures after tragedy. But Kibbo never attached to another human the way he attached to you. If we separate him again today, if he senses avoidance, it may break his trust with people entirely. And he is too important an ambassador for that risk." Maya's voice cracked. "Ambassador?" Amina nodded. "Kibbo travels with us to schools, conservation centers, communities near poaching zones. Children meet him, touch him. They listen when we speak of danger to elephants because he stands beside us embodying the reason to care." Maya smiled faintly. "He became what we hoped he would." Amina's eyes softened. "Yes. But that means he must continue trusting humans. And today, Maya, that depends on you." Silence. The weight of responsibility pressed down. Maya remembered Kibbo's tiny trunk curling around her wrist as if afraid she would disappear. She remembered his warm breath on her shoulder, the vibration of his rumble through her bones. She remembered leaving the sanctuary 5 years ago, turning away, telling herself it was necessary for his independence. But maybe independence had never meant detachment. Maybe she had misunderstood love. She looked up at Amina. "I'll do it," she whispered. Amina nodded once. "Follow me." They stepped out into sunlight. The earth smelled of rain and grass seeds. Birds scattered from the trees as doors opened across the sanctuary. Workers paused to watch. Something electric filled the air, an anticipation that seemed to vibrate the soil. Grace walked ahead again. Maya followed. They approached a wooden gate reinforced with steel, tall enough for a giraffe. Behind it was a long dirt path leading into a wide field surrounded by acacia trees. Maya could see movement, shifting gray forms, an entire elephant family group grazing. Their trunks swung like pendulums, tails swishing, ears flapping softly through air thick with humidity. Among them, larger than the rest, tusks curved like polished ivory, muscles moving beneath skin like living sculpture, was Kibbo. Her breath lodged in her throat. Amina spoke quietly behind her. You will open the gate alone. Walk halfway. Stop. Speak to him. If he chooses you, we will approach and join you. If he turns away, you must accept that, too. Maya swallowed. She understood the unspoken meaning. This was a test not just of memory, but of identity. She stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the gate latch. Her heart hammered. 5 years of silence, 5 years of doubt, 5 years of waiting, about to break open. She closed her eyes, opened the gate, and stepped inside. The elephants paused. Tails froze mid-swing. Ears stilled. The air changed, thicker, charged. Maya walked. 1 step. 2. 3. She stopped halfway just as instructed. Kibbo looked up. Their eyes locked across the distance. Her voice trembled, Kibbo. The world held its breath. For 1 long second, nothing happened. For 1 long second, Maya thought she had made a terrible mistake. Then Kibbo's ears flew forward. His trunk lifted. He let out a rumble so deep it vibrated her ribs. And he began to walk toward her? Not slowly, but with purpose, with recognition, with memory. And Maya felt the earth move beneath her feet as a 5-ton elephant came home. The rain had come early that year, thick curtains of silver water rolling across the Kenyan plains, turning every dirt path into mud, every river into a violent, roaring vein of brown. Elena stood outside the sanctuary barn, hands gripping a shovel, rain dripping down her hair and clothes, soaking her through to the skin. She had thought she was prepared for anything, but she wasn't prepared for this feeling, the unmistakable hollow grief of losing the only creature who had ever chosen her without condition. Her elephant, her baby, had been taken away by the Wildlife Authority. 5 days earlier. 5 days since the government truck rolled down the road, carrying Nia away to Tsavo National Park. 5 days since Elena had heard the last trumpet echo as the vehicle disappeared. And in those 5 days Elena had tried to become a ghost. She had forced herself to eat, to sleep, to write, to pretend that she hadn't left a part of her existence behind that morning when Nia was driven away. And every morning, she woke up to silence so loud it felt like a scream. Even the sanctuary workers kept their eyes down when she walked past. They had watched the bond form between woman and calf. They had seen the attachment grow, fierce and impossible. They had warned her gently to be cautious with her heart. But nobody warned her how empty she would feel without that heartbeat pressed against her side every night, without that small trunk curled around her wrist, without those giant trusting brown eyes looking at her as if she carried the stars. Tonight, she couldn't sleep anymore. So she worked, moving hay from stall to stall, clearing old straw, replacing ropes. Anything to stay busy. Anything to drown out memory. From the barn doorway, Samuel watched her silently. "You're going to break yourself," he finally said. "Already did," she muttered. Samuel stepped inside, boots sinking into the mud. He smelled of smoke and rain and the sharp earthiness of elephant musk. "You know she is safe," he said. "You know Tsavo is the best place for her. That is a blessing." Elena didn't look up. "I'm glad she's alive. That doesn't mean I'm okay." Silence. Samuel leaned against the stall wall. "In my language," he said quietly, "we have a word. Enkipai. It means joy. But not normal joy. Joy that is earned after suffering." Elena swallowed the knot in her throat. "And if you survive this," Samuel continued, "the universe might give you Enkipai. But you must survive first." Elena turned away, her face burning. She didn't want hope. Hope was a knife. Hope hurt more than grief. Samuel pushed away from the wall. "You leave for New York tomorrow." She flinched. "Don't remind me. You are doing the right thing. You came for an assignment. You finished it." "No," she whispered. I failed. Because you loved an elephant. Because I left her. Samuel stepped closer until his voice was barely a breath. If you never loved her, she would have died. Do not twist her miracle into shame. Elena shut her eyes. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere, thunder cracked. Samuel left her alone, and she kept working until her muscles trembled. Eventually she couldn't lift her arms anymore. She dropped the shovel and slid down the wall into the mud, chest heaving, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. Every night since Nia left, she cried quietly in bed, but this was different. This was surrender. She pressed her forehead into her knees and whispered into the storm, I don't know how to exist without you. And then she broke. Body shaking. Breath tearing out of her lungs in sharp, painful sounds. For the first time since the truck pulled away, she let herself mourn without control. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. When the rain finally weakened to a mist, Elena dragged herself up and walked to her cabin. She packed. Folded her last shirt. Closed her suitcase. Sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Her flight was in the morning. This was the end. She told herself to be grateful Nia was alive. She told herself adulthood required walking away from love sometimes. She told herself she would heal. But she knew she was lying. New York swallowed her whole. Lights. Noise. Traffic. Crowds. She sat again behind a news desk, well-dressed, polished, perfect posture, perfect voice. Professionals praised her reporting. Audiences admired her composure. Nobody knew she didn't sleep anymore. Nobody knew her phone background was a blurry photo of Nia the night before she left, eyes half closed, trunk wrapped around Elena's wrist. Nobody knew she sometimes woke up gasping because she could still hear the sound of elephant trumpeting through her dreams. The months passed like fading color. Emails came from Samuel. Updates from Zavo. Nia was growing. Healthy. Learning how to forage. Making friends with a juvenile herd. Every email made Elena cry harder. She watched clips of the elephants walking through long grass, with Nia marching beside them, bigger every week, majestic, wild. And Elena whispered her pride to empty rooms. She threw herself into work. But no matter how many countries she reported from, no matter how many important stories she covered, she always went home to silence heavy enough to crush her bones. Then came the phone call that changed everything. The network was launching a conservation series. They needed a reporter on location in Kenya. They wanted Elena. And before she could think, she said yes. When she stepped off the plane months later, back onto Kenyan soil, her knees nearly buckled. The heat. The smell of dust. The endless sky. Everything hit at once, memories, emotions, the sharp electric pulse of returning to the place that had rewritten her soul. Samuel met her in the airport. You look older, he said. I feel older. You are here for the elephants. No, she whispered. I'm here for one elephant. Samuel didn't smile. But his eyes softened. Then prepare yourself. What do you mean? Nia is not a baby anymore. I know. No, he corrected gently. You think you know. But she is not the calf who slept on your lap. She is nearly 5 meters tall. She follows a herd. She takes no milk. She fears nothing. Good, Elena whispered, throat tight. That's what I wanted. Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Are you sure? She wasn't. Not even a little. But she would find out soon, because Zavo had given permission. Tomorrow she would see Nia again. If Nia remembered her, the world would never be the same. If Nia didn't. Elena didn't know who she would become. That night, she lay awake in the dark Kenyan air and whispered. Nia, I'm here. Outside, thunder rumbled like distant footsteps. The sanctuary staff had warned Julia that elephants remembered not just faces, but voices, footsteps, and even the rhythm of a person's breath. Yet nothing, not scientific journals, not emotional testimonies, could have prepared her for what unfolded in the Nairobi television studio 4 days later. The network had invited Julia to film a live educational segment, The Reality of Elephant Conservation in East Africa. It was meant to be a calm, informative discussion, statistics, funding, habitat loss, nothing dangerous, nothing emotional, nothing unpredictable. But fate had other plans. The sanctuary director had insisted on one thing: they wanted to bring along an ambassador elephant. A calm individual, familiar with humans, trained to remain composed indoors. Television crews loved the idea. Viewers loved animals. Everyone believed it would be a hit. Nobody knew which elephant was being transported. Nobody even considered the possibility. The handlers had kept the animal inside a modified transport container, hidden from the lighting crew, chained safely inside a climate-controlled trailer waiting behind the building. Julia didn't dare ask. She sat behind the interview desk, makeup lightly dusted over trembling skin, earpiece fitted, microphone taped securely to her collarbone. Across from her stood 2 anchors from New York, visible through the long, glass monitor in front of her. They were smiling professionally, unaware of the storm building beneath the surface. Behind the camera, the Nairobi studio hummed, the distant murmur of producers, the rustle of cables, the heavy scent of equipment. Everything felt strangely muffled to Julia, as though she sat underwater. The countdown began inside her earpiece. Going live in 10, 9. Julia inhaled. She looked straight into the lens. 3, 2, 1. New York spoke first. We are joined now by wildlife conservationist Julia Ames, who spent years working to protect vulnerable elephant populations in East Africa. Julia smiled on cue. She sounded composed, confident, every syllable shaped by muscle memory. She spoke about shrinking forests, illegal ivory trade, the emotional intelligence of elephants. Every word believable. Every breath steady. She didn't once mention Nola. She didn't dare. Halfway through the segment, a Nairobi producer approached the camera floor. "It's time," he whispered to the handlers. Julia heard the sound of heavy wheels rolling over the studio tile, the elephant container being pushed forward. Still, the producers kept the elephant just off screen. The plan was simple. Talk for a few minutes. Bring out the ambassador elephant. End with audience applause. But then, something broke through the air. A sound. A vibration. Barely audible. A breath rumble so low it was felt in ribs before ears. Julia froze. The anchors continued speaking, but their voices fell away as another sound followed. Short. Sharp. Personal. A low, soft trumpet. The kind elephants made only toward calves, family, or someone they trusted beyond instinct. Julia's pulse slammed into her throat. Impossible. There were many elephants in the sanctuary. Many who had been bottle-fed. Many who trusted handlers, vets, and visitors. But Nola's voice. Julia would know it anywhere. Her fingers curled over the edge of the desk. She tried to swallow, but her throat tightened. Behind the glowing cameras, the handlers opened the transport gate. A silence fell across the crew, sharp, electric, heavy with suspense. Then she stepped through. Nola. Fully grown. Her tusks gentle curves of ivory. Her ears enormous, shaped like the continent she still walked upon. Her forehead scar, barely visible beneath new wrinkled skin, proof of her battle 5 years ago. The elephant paused beneath the studio lights, looking impossibly ancient and heartbreakingly familiar. Gasps rippled across the room. Julia's breath shattered. Her mind screamed logic. It can't be her. It can't be Nola. She won't remember you. She won't even look at you. But Nola didn't behave like a wild animal confused by a strange building. She behaved like someone listening. Her enormous head turned. She scanned the room. Her trunk lifted, tasting air particles, reading scent molecules millions of years older than human civilization. Julia could feel every atom inside her collapsing. The anchors murmured, stunned. The Nairobi crew whispered. One handler stepped forward, unsure. But the elephant ignored all of them. She stepped toward Julia. Slowly at first, testing the slick floor tile. Then faster. Confidently. The floor shook under her weight. Cameras trembled on their stands. The producer shouted for caution, his voice cracking with nerves. But Nola didn't stop. She didn't hesitate. She didn't forget. Her trunk reached across the room and brushed Julia's face. And Julia, professional, controlled, trained to never break on live television, folded forward, sobbing into warm, wrinkled skin. The anchors in New York fell completely silent. Viewers watching from home saw a conservation interview become a reunion no scientist had ever predicted. Nola let out a long, rolling purrumble. Elephants made that sound only at birth, reunion, and death. Julia spoke with broken breath. I raised her from 5 weeks old, she was dying, and she remembered me. The handler stared wide-eyed, whispering prayers in Swahili. The Nairobi director threw the script aside. Keep the camera rolling. The moment was too pure to interrupt. Julia pressed her forehead against Nola's trunk. Her tears soaked into dusty skin. I never stopped thinking about you, she whispered. Nola answered by curling her trunk around Julia's shoulder, pulling her into an embrace that defied science, distance, and 5 silent years. Around them, the entire studio wept. Viewers around the world watched live. As an elephant proved memory wasn't biology. It was love. And for the first time since leaving Africa, Julia felt whole. Outside, Nairobi traffic rumbled. Inside, the world shifted forever. Nola nudged Julia's chest again. The exact spot she used to sleep against as a calf. We have studied them for centuries, Julia whispered, voice shaking. But we still know so little. The cameras captured everything. The tremor in Nola's movements. The way she leaned into human touch. The way her eyes softened at Julia's voice. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't instinct. This was history. The crew watched something that would become global evidence. An orphaned elephant remembered the woman who saved her, not by sight, not by scent, but by love. And the world would never look at elephants the same way again. The world outside the sanctuary never knew what truly happened inside that training enclosure on the day Mara recognized Claire, but word spread quickly. Newspapers called it a miracle. Television networks demanded interviews. Wildlife biologists argued on camera about memory and emotional imprinting in elephants. But for Claire, none of that mattered. What mattered was the quiet, sacred understanding that existed between her and Mara, an understanding the world could never fully translate. Over the next 3 days, Claire remained at the sanctuary, walking with Mara at sunrise, feeding her fresh branches, and sitting beside the elephant as she slept in the shade of the baobab trees. Daniel watched from a respectful distance, letting the bond unfold without interference. What now? He asked Claire on the 4th morning, while Mara splashed her trunk through a watering trough like an oversized child. Claire didn't speak for several seconds, she simply looked at Mara, at the rhythmic sway of her ears, at the way she lifted her trunk every few minutes to smell the air around Claire, as if confirming she was still there. I don't know yet, she finally said. But I know I'm not flying home tomorrow. She had spent years moving through life as if numb, working jobs she didn't love, eating alone in a silent apartment, waking up from dreams that left her choking on grief. Something about Mara's absence had hollowed her. Now, being here again, beside the living creature she once saved, it was as if the color had returned to the world. Daniel nodded slowly. Then stay, he said. Elephants don't rush time. Neither should you. That afternoon, Mara led Claire somewhere unexpected. With slow, deliberate steps, the elephant nudged Claire away from the sanctuary's open fields and into the narrow forest path that bordered the reserve. Rangers followed at a distance, uneasy but trusting Daniel's instincts. Mara wasn't wandering, she was leading. Claire walked beside the elephant until they reached a clearing she had never seen, a quiet meadow shaped by wind and time. Mara stopped, raised her trunk, and released a long, trembling rumble. Claire's chest tightened. She understood. "This is where they buried her mother, isn't it?" she whispered. Daniel, who had followed behind, stopped near the edge of the clearing. His silence was confirmation. Mara rumbled again, deeper this time, a sound that vibrated the ground beneath their feet. Claire stepped closer, resting her hand on Mara's leg. "You still remember?" "All of it," she whispered. "Your mother?" "My voice. Everything." The elephant lowered herself until her massive head rested against Claire's chest, something she had never done with any human. Claire wrapped both arms around Mara's face, tears sliding freely down her cheeks. The meadow was so quiet that the sound of Claire's heartbeat seemed to echo between them. For minutes, or hours, she couldn't tell, Claire held Mara the way she once had when the elephant was just a baby, trembling and starving and terrified. But Mara was no longer small. She was enormous, strong, capable, wise. "You survived without me," Claire whispered, smiling through grief. "You didn't need saving. You just needed to know you were loved." Mara lifted her head, exhaling a warm burst of air that fluttered Claire's hair. And then, to the shock of everyone watching, she used her trunk to lift Claire's hand and press it to her own chest. A mirror of something Claire once did 5 years ago when Mara had been too weak to stand. It felt like an answer, like language without words. "I remember. I know you. You are home." The rangers wiped their faces discreetly. Daniel turned away, pretending to inspect the tree line, because he couldn't bear the emotion on Claire's face. When Mara finally rose and turned back toward the sanctuary, Claire followed with steps that felt weightless. That night, the staff gathered in the community hall to celebrate Mara's recovery and Claire's return. Music played through old speakers, lights glowed from lantern flames, and Mara slept peacefully nearby, her breathing deep and even. Claire stood near the doorway, watching the people who had protected Mara for years. These were strangers who loved the elephant just as fiercely as she did. Daniel approached with 2 mugs of sweet tea. "You know," he began slowly, "the sanctuary needs a media director. Someone who can tell our story to the world. Someone who knows what bonds like this mean." Claire laughed softly. "Daniel, I came here for 4 days." "And you're going to leave again?" he asked gently. She froze. Because the truth was written across every part of her being. Mara was not just a memory. Not just a moment of recognition. She was family. And family wasn't something you walked away from twice. The next morning, Claire made a call to her employer, resigning from the job she had kept only out of necessity. She sold her return ticket. She rented a small room near the sanctuary. And for the first time in 5 years, she woke without emptiness inside her chest. Her new routine began before sunrise. She fed Mara breakfast leaves while the elephant huffed with sleepy annoyance. She brushed the dust from Mara's shoulders, humming softly while the elephant leaned into her touch. She walked beside her into the fields at dawn, where pink light painted the world gold. Every day, the bond deepened, not because Mara remembered the past, but because she chose the present. Months passed. And when tourists visited, Mara approached only if Claire stood beside them. When researchers attempted vocalization tests, Mara responded only to Claire's voice first. And late at night, when the forest winds howled and the world turned silent, Mara slept beside the fence closest to Claire's cabin, her silhouette visible through moonlight, a silent guardian reminding Claire she was never alone. In time, Claire became part of the sanctuary staff, training volunteers, filming conservation footage, caring for new orphaned elephants who needed soft hands and steady voices. Mara watched it all with calm authority, as if approving every decision Claire made. One evening, Daniel found Claire sitting beside the elephant again, her back pressed to Mara's enormous shoulder. "You know," Daniel said quietly, "some people spend their whole lives waiting to feel needed. You walked halfway around the world and found it." Claire smiled. "No," she answered. I walked halfway around the world and found family." Mara rumbled, a deep, delighted sound that vibrated through both of them. Claire laughed at the perfect timing. The sun dipped behind distant hills, painting the sky in shades of fire. And as the first stars appeared, Claire spoke aloud the truth she had carried for 5 silent, painful years. "She never forgot me. And I will never leave her again." Mara curled her trunk around Claire's waist, a gentle, deliberate embrace. This wasn't a reunion anymore. It was a beginning. A life reclaimed. A bond made unbreakable by time, distance, and grief. And for the first time since the day the baby elephant was taken away, Claire felt whole. Because some animals never forget the sound of love, especially when love never stopped calling.